Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls her age. While her classmates spent their afternoons at the mall or practicing cheerleading routines, Sarah could be found at the local shooting range with her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran who taught her that precision wasn't just about hitting a target. It was about understanding wind, distance, breathing, and, most importantly, patience. Growing up in rural Montana, Sarah learned to shoot before she learned to drive. Her grandfather's old hunting rifle became an extension of her arms, and by the time she turned 16, she could hit a quarter-size target at 300 yards consistently. The local hunters often joked that Sarah could outshoot most of them, but they said it with the kind of dismissive laughter that suggested they didn't really believe a teenage girl could be that good. When Sarah announced her intention to join the military after high school, her family wasn't surprised. What surprised them was her determination to become a sniper. Her parents worried about their daughter entering such a dangerous and male-dominated field, but Sarah's mind was made up. She had read every book about military snipers she could find, studied ballistics tables until she could recite them from memory, and practiced shooting in all weather conditions. Basic training at Fort Benning was everything Sarah expected and more. The physical demands pushed her to her limits, but she never complained. While some of her fellow recruits struggled with the shooting portions of their training, Sarah excelled. Her drill sergeants noticed her exceptional marksmanship abilities, but they also noticed something else, the way her male counterparts treated her. Despite consistently outscoring most of the men in her unit during shooting exercises, Sarah found herself being overlooked when it came to opportunities for advanced training. When positions opened up for sniper school consideration, her name wasn't on the list. The reasoning was always the same. They needed someone with more experience, someone who could handle the pressure, someone who could carry the heavy equipment over long distances. After completing basic training and advanced individual training, Sarah was assigned to the 75th Ranger Regiment as a designated marksman. It wasn't the sniper position she had hoped for, but it was a step in the right direction. The regiment was preparing for deployment to Afghanistan, and Sarah knew this would be her chance to prove herself in real combat situations. The other soldiers in her unit were professional but distant. They acknowledged her shooting skills, but treated them as a novelty rather than a valuable asset. Staff Sergeant Mike Thompson, her squad leader, was fair but skeptical. He had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and had never worked with a female sniper. His experience told him that combat was no place for experimentation with unit dynamics. During pre-deployment training at Fort Bragg, Sarah's unit practiced various scenarios they might encounter in Afghanistan. Urban warfare, mountain operations, and desert patrol tactics were drilled repeatedly. Sarah excelled in every exercise, particularly those involving long-range target identification and elimination. Her ability to read environmental conditions and adjust for variables like wind speed, temperature, and humidity was uncanny. One particular training exercise involved a simulated village clearing operation. Sarah was positioned on overwatch, providing sniper support for her squad as they moved through the mock village. The exercise called for her to neutralize several targets at distances ranging from 400 to 800 meters while her teammates advanced on foot. As Sarah settled into her position behind her M24 sniper weapon system, she felt the familiar calm that always came over her when she was behind a rifle. The weight of the weapon, the feel of the stock against her cheek, and the clarity of the scope's view all combined to create a sense of complete focus. She controlled her breathing, calculated the wind drift, and began engaging targets. One by one, Sarah's shots found their marks with mechanical precision. The training instructors monitoring the exercise were impressed by her accuracy, but more importantly, they noticed her ability to communicate effectively with her advancing squad. She provided clear, concise updates on enemy positions and potential threats, demonstrating that she understood her role as more than just a shooter. Despite her performance during training, Sarah still felt like an outsider in her unit. The conversations often stopped when she approached, and she was rarely included in the informal discussions about tactics, and strategy that happened after official training sessions ended. She understood that trust in military units was earned through shared experiences, particularly combat experiences, but the exclusion still stung. Captain James Rodriguez, the company commander, had been watching Sarah's progress with interest. He had served with female soldiers before and understood the unique challenges they faced in proving themselves. Captain Rodriguez also understood the value of having skilled marksmen in his unit, regardless of their gender. He made a note to keep a close eye on how Sarah performed during their upcoming deployment. The weeks leading up to deployment were filled with equipment checks, briefings, and final preparations. Sarah spent extra time familiarizing herself with the terrain and climate conditions they would encounter in Afghanistan. She studied satellite images of their area of operations, memorized the ballistic table for the ammunition they would be using, and practiced shooting at various elevations to simulate the mountainous terrain they would face. When the deployment orders finally came, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This was what she had been training for her entire military career. She knew that combat would test not just her shooting skills, but her mental toughness, decision-making abilities, and capacity to work effectively under pressure. Most importantly, she knew that her performance in Afghanistan would determine whether she would ever get the chance to attend sniper school and pursue her dream of becoming a fully qualified military sniper. The flight to Afghanistan was long and uncomfortable, but Sarah used the time to review her equipment and run through mental exercises her grandfather had taught her. He had always said that the mind was the most important weapon a sniper possessed, and Sarah was determined to prove him right. As their transport aircraft descended toward Bagram Airfield, Sarah looked out the small window at the rugged landscape below. The mountains stretched endlessly in all directions, their peaks covered with snow even in the middle of summer. She thought about her grandfather, who had passed away 2 years earlier, and wondered what advice he would give her if he were still alive. She could almost hear his voice telling her to trust her training, stay focused, and never let anyone convince her that she wasn't good enough. The aircraft touched down with a jarring thud, and Sarah felt her stomach drop. This was it, her chance to prove that gender didn't matter when it came to protecting American soldiers and completing the mission. She grabbed her gear and followed her squad off the aircraft, stepping into the harsh Afghan sun for the first time. The base at Bagram was a sprawling complex of tents, prefabricated buildings, and defensive positions. The smell of diesel fuel and dust filled the air, and the constant noise of helicopters and vehicles created a backdrop of organized chaos. Sarah was assigned to a tent with 3 other soldiers, all male, who were polite but not particularly welcoming. During their first week in Afghanistan, Sarah's unit conducted several patrol missions to familiarize themselves with their area of operations. These patrols were relatively routine, designed more to show an American presence than to engage enemy forces. Sarah carried her M24 rifle on every patrol, but the opportunities to use her specialized skills were limited. On their 4th patrol, Sarah's unit encountered their first real taste of combat. They were conducting a routine sweep through a valley suspected of harboring Taliban fighters when they came under fire from positions in the surrounding hills. The initial attack was brief but intense, with automatic weapons fire coming from at least 3 different directions. Staff Sergeant Thompson immediately called for his soldiers to take cover and return fire. Sarah found herself behind a large boulder, her rifle ready but without a clear target. The enemy positions were well concealed, and the incoming fire was accurate enough to keep her squad pinned down. She could hear Thompson on the radio, calling for air support and reporting their situation to headquarters. As Sarah scanned the hillsides through her scope, she caught a glimpse of muzzle flash from a position approximately 600 meters away. The shooter was well hidden behind a rock formation, but Sarah could see enough of his position to get an accurate shot. She called out the target location to Thompson, but he was focused on coordinating their response and didn't seem to hear her. Sarah made a decision that would later prove to be significant. Without waiting for specific orders, she adjusted her scope for the distance and environmental conditions, controlled her breathing, and fired. The shot was true, and the muzzle flashes from that position immediately ceased. She quickly scanned for other targets and identified a second enemy position about 750 meters away. The second shot was more challenging due to the increased distance and the fact that the target was moving between cover positions. Sarah had to lead the target and account for the bullet's travel time. She fired, and again the enemy fire from that position stopped. Within minutes, the remaining enemy fighters had withdrawn, leaving Sarah's squad free to continue their mission. Despite her successful engagement of enemy targets, Sarah's actions received little acknowledgement from her squad mates. Staff Sergeant Thompson noted her performance in his after-action report, but there was no discussion of her shooting or its impact on the mission's success. Sarah realized that she would need to prove herself repeatedly before her skills would be fully recognized and valued. The pattern continued over the following weeks. Sarah's unit conducted numerous patrols and engaged enemy forces on several occasions. Each time, Sarah's marksmanship proved valuable, but each time her contributions seemed to be minimized or overlooked. She began to understand that proving herself in combat was only half the battle. The other half was changing the attitudes and perceptions of her fellow soldiers. One evening, while cleaning her rifle after a particularly challenging patrol, Sarah was approached by Corporal Danny Wu, one of the newer soldiers in their unit. Wu was young and eager, and unlike some of the more experienced soldiers, he didn't seem to have preconceived notions about female soldiers. "That was some nice shooting today," Wu said, sitting down on a nearby crate. "I saw you take out that sniper in the tower from about 800 meters. How did you even see him?" Sarah looked up from her rifle, surprised by the compliment. "Training and patience," she replied. "Most people look for movement, but sometimes you have to look for what doesn't belong." That tower had been empty every other time we passed it, so when I saw a shadow that wasn't quite right, I knew something was there. Wu nodded thoughtfully. "I've been watching you on these patrols. You see things the rest of us miss. Have you ever thought about trying for sniper school?" Sarah almost laughed. "I've been trying to get into sniper school since I enlisted. The problem is getting someone to recommend me for the training. Apparently, being able to consistently hit targets at long range isn't enough qualification." Their conversation was interrupted by Staff Sergeant Thompson, who approached with a serious expression on his face. "Martinez, Wu, pack your gear. We've got a mission briefing in 20 minutes. High-value target in a compound about 15 kilometers north of here. This one's going to be different." As Sarah gathered her equipment, she felt the familiar mixture of excitement and nervousness that came before a significant mission. She had no way of knowing that this particular operation would change everything, not just for her, but for how her entire unit viewed her capabilities as a soldier and a marksman. The mission briefing took place in a cramped tent that served as the Tactical Operations Center. Captain Rodriguez stood at the front of the room, pointing to a large satellite image pinned to a makeshift easel. The image showed a walled compound nestled in a valley between two steep ridges, with several buildings and what appeared to be defensive positions. Intelligence indicates that Ahmad Shah Massoud, a high-ranking Taliban commander, is using this compound as a safe house, Captain Rodriguez began. He's responsible for coordinating attacks against coalition forces throughout this region, and we have a narrow window to capture or eliminate him before he moves to another location. Sarah studied the satellite image carefully, noting the distances between the compound and the surrounding hills. The tactical situation was complex, the compound was well defended, and positioned in a way that made a direct assault extremely dangerous. Any attacking force will be exposed to fire from multiple directions as they approach the target. "The plan is straightforward," Captain Rodriguez continued. "First squad will approach from the east, using the wadi for concealment. Second squad will provide overwatch from the ridge to the south. Third squad will establish a blocking position to the north in case our target tries to escape." "Questions?" Staff Sergeant Thompson raised his hand. "Sir, What about sniper support for the assault element? That compound has clear fields of fire in every direction. First squad is going to be exposed for at least 400 meters as they approach. Captain Rodriguez nodded. Good point, Thompson. We'll have Sergeant Chun and his M240 providing suppressive fire from the southern ridge. But you're right that we need precision fire to neutralize specific threats. Martinez, you'll be positioned on the northern ridge with overwatch responsibility for the entire operation. Sarah felt a surge of excitement, mixed with anxiety. This was exactly the kind of mission she had been training for, but it was also the most responsibility she had been given since arriving in Afghanistan. She would be operating alone, without the immediate support of her squad, and the success of the entire operation might depend on her ability to identify and eliminate threats at long range. After the briefing, Sarah spent several hours studying the mission details and preparing her equipment. The northern ridge was approximately 1,200 meters from the target compound, which was well within the effective range of her M24 rifle, but would require careful consideration of environmental factors. The elevation difference between her position and the target was significant, and she would need to account for the effects of gravity on her bullet trajectory. Sarah also studied the intelligence reports about Ahmad Shah Massoud and his known associates. The Taliban commander was described as highly intelligent and extremely cautious. He rarely stayed in one location for more than a few days and always traveled with experienced bodyguards. If he was indeed at the compound, he would be well protected and quick to flee if he sensed danger. The mission was scheduled to begin at 0400 hours, under cover of darkness. Sarah would move into position several hours before the assault began, giving her time to establish a concealed firing position and conduct detailed surveillance of the target area. The timing was critical. They needed to maintain the element of surprise while ensuring that all elements were in position before beginning the assault. At 0200 hours, Sarah began her movement toward the northern ridge. She carried her M24 rifle, 100 rounds of match-grade ammunition, a spotting scope, night vision equipment, and enough food and water for 24 hours. The weight of her equipment was substantial, but Sarah had trained extensively with heavy loads and was confident in her ability to reach her position undetected. The movement to the ridge took nearly 2 hours through difficult terrain. Sarah moved slowly and carefully, using natural concealment and avoiding areas where she might be silhouetted against the sky. She had to cross 2 wadis and navigate around several rocky outcroppings before reaching her intended position. As Sarah established her firing position on the northern ridge, she was struck by the natural beauty of the Afghan landscape. Despite the danger and violence that had brought her here, she couldn't help but appreciate the stark beauty of the mountains and valleys. The stars were incredibly bright in the clear, thin air, and the silence was profound. Sarah used her night vision equipment to conduct detailed surveillance of the target compound. She could see guards moving along the walls and noted the positions of several vehicles inside the compound. There was definite activity in the main building, with lights visible in several windows and shadows moving behind curtains. At 0530 hours, Sarah received word over her radio that all elements were in position and ready to begin the assault. She conducted a final check of her equipment and settled into her shooting position. The sun was beginning to rise, and she would soon have the benefit of natural light for target identification. The assault began with a coordinated movement by First Squad toward the compound's eastern wall. Sarah watched through her scope as the soldiers moved across the open ground, using whatever cover was available. Almost immediately, muzzle flashes appeared from several positions along the compound walls as the defenders opened fire. Sarah's first target was a guard on the northern wall who was firing an AK-47 at the advancing soldiers. The distance was approximately 980 meters, and Sarah had to account for the wind drift and the elevation difference. She controlled her breathing, acquired the target, and fired. The guard immediately dropped out of sight. Before Sarah could celebrate her successful shot, she noticed movement in one of the compound's buildings. A figure appeared in a second-story window carrying what looked like a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. This was an immediate threat to the advancing soldiers, and Sarah quickly shifted her aim to engage this new target. The shot was more challenging because the target was partially concealed behind the window frame, and the angle required Sarah to fire through glass. She aimed carefully and fired, and the figure disappeared from the window. A moment later, an explosion inside the building confirmed that her shot had prevented the RPG from being fired at the advancing American soldiers. As the assault continued, Sarah found herself engaging targets throughout the compound. Her elevated position gave her a clear view of the entire area, and she was able to identify threats that the ground forces couldn't see. She neutralized a sniper on the compound's western wall, eliminated 2 fighters who were attempting to flank First Squad's position, and disabled a vehicle that was being prepared for escape. Throughout the engagement, Sarah maintained constant radio communication with the ground forces, providing intelligence about enemy movements and positions. Her ability to see the entire battlefield allowed her to coordinate the movements of the different elements and prevent the defenders from organizing an effective counterattack. The most critical moment of the operation came when First Squad reached the main building and began clearing rooms. Sarah was watching through her scope when she saw a figure matching Ahmad Shah Massoud's description moving between buildings, apparently attempting to reach one of the vehicles for escape. The distance was approximately 1,100 meters, and the target was moving quickly. Sarah had only a few seconds to make the shot before the target would be out of sight. She led the moving figure, accounting for the distance and his speed of movement, and fired. The shot struck the target's center mass, and he dropped immediately. Later intelligence would confirm that Sarah had successfully eliminated the high-value target that was the primary objective of the entire operation. The remainder of the assault proceeded quickly once the compound's leadership was eliminated. The remaining defenders either surrendered or fled, and First Squad was able to secure the compound and gather valuable intelligence materials. The entire operation took less than 2 hours from start to finish, and there were no American casualties. During the post-mission briefing, Captain Rodriguez made specific mention of Sarah's performance during the operation. Her ability to provide overwatch for the entire battlefield and eliminate key threats had been instrumental in the mission's success. For the first time since arriving in Afghanistan, Sarah felt that her contributions were being fully recognized and valued. Staff Sergeant Thompson, who had initially been skeptical of Sarah's abilities, approached her after the briefing with a new level of respect in his voice. "Martinez, I owe you an apology," he said. "I've been in this business for a long time, and I thought I knew what to expect from different soldiers. You proved me wrong today, and you saved American lives in the process." Sarah appreciated the acknowledgement, but she also understood that one successful mission didn't erase months of being overlooked and underestimated. She knew that she would need to continue proving herself with every mission, and that the attitudes of some soldiers would be harder to change than others. Word of Sarah's performance during the compound raid spread quickly throughout the base. Soldiers who had previously dismissed her abilities began to take notice of her skills, and she found herself being included in tactical discussions that had previously been closed to her. The informal barriers that had existed were beginning to break down. Captain Rodriguez called Sarah to his office 3 days after the mission. "Martinez, I've been reviewing your performance over the past few months, and I'm impressed with what I've seen," he said. "Your marksmanship skills are exceptional, but more importantly, you've demonstrated the tactical awareness and decision-making abilities that we look for in our best soldiers." Sarah waited to hear what Captain Rodriguez had in mind. She had learned not to get her hopes up when it came to opportunities for advancement or specialized training. "I'm recommending you for the Army Sniper School at Fort Benning," Captain Rodriguez continued. "The next class starts in 6 months, which would be perfect timing for when our deployment ends. I think you have the potential to be one of the best snipers in the Army, and I want to give you that opportunity." Sarah felt a wave of excitement and gratitude, but she also felt a nagging doubt. She had been disappointed before when opportunities had been promised, but never materialized. "Sir, I appreciate the recommendation, but I've been told before that slots for sniper school are limited and that there might not be room for someone with my experience level." Captain Rodriguez smiled. "Martinez, let me be clear about something. This recommendation is based purely on merit and the demonstrated performance in combat. Your gender, your experience level, and any other factors that might have held you back before are irrelevant. You've proven that you belong here, and you've earned this opportunity." As Sarah left Captain Rodriguez's office, she felt a mixture of emotions. The opportunity to attend sniper school was everything she had been working toward, but she also knew that the real test would come if and when she was accepted into the program. Sniper school was notoriously difficult with high standards and a significant dropout rate. She would be competing against some of the most skilled marksmen in the military, most of whom would be men with extensive combat experience. Over the following weeks, Sarah's unit continued to conduct operations throughout their area of responsibility. Sarah's role as the designated marksman became increasingly important, and she found herself being consulted on tactical matters that extended beyond just shooting. Her ability to read terrain, assess threats, and provide accurate intelligence made her a valuable member of the team in ways that went beyond her marksmanship skills. During one particular mission, Sarah's unit was tasked with providing security for a convoy moving through a dangerous mountain pass. Intelligence indicated that Taliban fighters had been using the area for ambush attacks, and Sarah's overwatch position would be critical for identifying threats before they could engage the convoy. The mission required Sarah to establish a position on a ridge overlooking the pass, approximately 1,500 meters from the road where the convoy would travel. This was near the maximum effective range of her M24 rifle, but Sarah was confident in her ability to make accurate shots at that distance given the proper conditions. As the convoy moved through the pass, Sarah maintained constant surveillance of the surrounding area. Her patience was rewarded when she spotted movement in a cluster of rocks about 1,200 meters away. Through her scope, she could see several figures setting up what appeared to be an improvised explosive device along the convoy route. Sarah immediately reported the enemy activity to the convoy commander and prepared to engage the targets. The shot would be challenging due to the distance and the fact that the targets were partially concealed behind rocks. She would have only one or two opportunities before the enemy fighters realized they had been detected and either fled or changed positions. Sarah's first shot struck the lead fighter's center mass, causing the others to scatter for cover. She quickly shifted to a second target and fired again, neutralizing another threat before the remaining fighters could organize a response. Her actions prevented a potentially devastating attack on the convoy and demonstrated once again her value as a precision marksman. The success of missions like the convoy escort and the compound raid began to change how Sarah was perceived not just within her own unit, but throughout the base. Word of her abilities spread to other units, and she began receiving requests for her expertise on particularly challenging missions. For the first time in her military career, Sarah felt that her skills were being fully utilized and appreciated. However, Sarah also understood that her success in Afghanistan was just the beginning of her journey. The real test would come when she returned to the United States and attempted to continue her career in the military. Combat deployments were temporary, but the attitudes and perceptions that had initially held her back were more persistent and would likely continue to be challenges in the future 6 months later. Sarah found herself back at Fort Benning, Georgia, standing in formation with 23 other soldiers who had been selected for the Army Sniper School. The humid Georgia air was a stark contrast to the dry, thin atmosphere of Afghanistan, but Sarah felt a familiar sense of anticipation and nervousness that reminded her of her first day of basic training. The sniper school was everything Sarah had imagined and more. The selection process had been rigorous, with extensive background checks, physical fitness tests, and psychological evaluations. Only the most qualified soldiers were accepted into the program, and Sarah knew she would be competing against some of the best marksmen in the military. Master Sergeant William Hayes, the chief instructor for the sniper school, was a legendary figure in the Army's sniper community. He had served multiple combat tours and was credited with some of the longest confirmed kills in military history. His reputation for demanding perfection from his students was well known, and many soldiers considered graduating from his program to be the ultimate validation of their skills. Ladies and gentlemen, Master Sergeant Hayes addressed the assembled students on their first day. You are here because someone believes you have the potential to become one of the Army's elite snipers. However, belief and potential are not enough. Over the next 8 weeks, you will be tested in ways you cannot imagine. Some of you will not make it to graduation. That is not a failure. It is simply the reality of maintaining the highest standards in the military. Sarah noticed that she was the only woman in the class, which didn't surprise her, but did remind her of the additional scrutiny she would face throughout the program. She had learned from her experiences in Afghanistan that the best way to deal with skepticism was to let her performance speak for itself. The first week of sniper school focused on the fundamentals of marksmanship and fieldcraft. Sarah excelled in the shooting portions of the training, consistently scoring among the highest in the class on various marksmanship tests. Her years of practice with her grandfather's rifle and her combat experience in Afghanistan had given her a solid foundation in shooting fundamentals. However, Sarah quickly discovered that being a military sniper required much more than just shooting skills. The students were taught advanced camouflage techniques, stalking methods, observation skills, and target identification procedures. They learned to move undetected through various types of terrain and to remain hidden for hours or even days while conducting surveillance missions. One of the most challenging aspects of the training was the stalking exercises. Students were required to move across open terrain without being detected by instructors who were equipped with high-powered optics and extensive experience in counter-sniper techniques. The exercise required not just physical skill, but also mental discipline and creativity in finding concealment where none seemed to exist. During her first stalking exercise, Sarah found herself crawling across a field that offered virtually no natural concealment. The instructors were positioned approximately 1,000 meters away, scanning the area with spotting scopes and binoculars. Sarah had to move slowly and carefully, using micro-terrain features and careful movement to avoid detection. The exercise took nearly 4 hours to complete, with Sarah covering less than 800 meters of ground. She used every technique she had learned about camouflage and concealment, adjusting her position constantly to take advantage of shadows, depressions in the ground, and even individual bushes or rocks that could provide momentary concealment. When Sarah finally reached her designated firing position, she had to take a precision shot at a target 600 meters away while remaining undetected by the instructors. The shot had to be taken within a specific time window, and any movement that revealed her position would result in failure for the exercise. Sarah controlled her breathing, aligned her shot, and fired. The target indicated a hit, and she received confirmation that she had not been detected by any of the instructors. It was a small victory, but Sarah knew that each successful exercise built toward her ultimate goal of graduating from the program. As the weeks progressed, the training became increasingly difficult. Students were required to demonstrate proficiency in urban sniper techniques, night operations, and extreme long-range shooting. The academic portion of the program covered ballistics, meteorology, range estimation, and target analysis. Sarah found herself studying late into the night, determined to master every aspect of the curriculum. One of the most challenging exercises occurred during the 4th week of the program. Students were required to conduct a 48-hour surveillance mission in a wooded area surrounding a mock village. They had to observe the village, identify specific targets, and report their activities while remaining completely undetected by the opposing force that was actively searching for them. Sarah established her observation position in a cluster of trees, approximately 800 meters from the village. She had to remain motionless for hours at a time, using her spotting scope to monitor activities in the village while avoiding detection by the patrol teams that regularly swept the surrounding area. The mental discipline required for the exercise was as challenging as the physical demands. Sarah had to maintain constant vigilance while fighting off fatigue, hunger, and the natural human tendency to move or adjust position. She documented the movements of various individuals in the village, noting patterns in their behavior and identifying potential high-value targets. On the second day of the exercise, Sarah observed a figure she believed to be the primary target entering one of the buildings in the village. The individual matched the description provided in her mission briefing, and his behavior suggested he was indeed a person of importance. However, Sarah had to be certain of her identification before reporting the sighting. Sarah spent several hours observing the target through her scope, noting distinctive features and behavioral patterns. She compared what she saw with the detailed description provided in her briefing materials and concluded with high confidence that she had identified the correct individual. Her report was later confirmed to be accurate, and she received high marks for the thoroughness of her observation and the accuracy of her target identification. The shooting portion of sniper school was where Sarah's natural abilities and extensive training really showed. The program included precision shooting at various distances, from 300 meters out to 1,200 meters. Students were required to demonstrate consistency and accuracy under different conditions, including wind, rain, and varying light conditions. Sarah consistently scored among the highest in the class on shooting exercises. Her understanding of ballistics, combined with her ability to read environmental conditions, allowed her to make accurate shots even in challenging circumstances. She began to earn the respect of her classmates, who initially had been skeptical of her abilities. Private First Class Marcus Johnson was one of the students who had initially doubted whether a woman could succeed in sniper school. Johnson was an experienced infantry soldier with multiple combat deployments, and he had preconceived notions about the physical and mental demands of sniper operations. However, Sarah's performance during training gradually changed his perspective. "I have to admit, Martinez," Johnson said during a break between exercises, "you're making shots that some guys with years of experience can't make. I don't know how you do it, but whatever you're doing is working." Sarah appreciated the acknowledgement, but she also understood that earning respect from her classmates was an ongoing process. Each exercise, each shot, and each demonstration of competence built toward her ultimate acceptance as a legitimate member of the sniper community. The most challenging test came during the 7th week of the program, the final field exercise. Students were required to plan and execute a complete sniper mission, including infiltration, target identification, shot execution, and exfiltration. The exercise was designed to test every skill they had learned throughout the program under realistic conditions. Sarah's mission required her to infiltrate a designated area, locate and eliminate a specific high-value target, and extract without being detected by a substantial opposing force. The target would be located in a compound similar to those she had encountered in Afghanistan, but the exercise would take place in the dense forests of Georgia rather than the open terrain of the Afghan mountains. Sarah spent 2 days planning her mission, studying satellite imagery and topographic maps of the area. She identified potential infiltration routes, established primary and alternate firing positions, and developed contingency plans for various scenarios. The level of detail required for the planning process was extensive, and Sarah understood that poor planning would lead to mission failure regardless of her shooting skills. The infiltration phase of the mission began at dusk on a humid Georgia evening. Sarah carried her M24 rifle along with additional equipment for the 3-day exercise, including camouflage materials, food, water, and communication gear. The weight of her equipment was substantial, but Her physical conditioning and experience in Afghanistan had prepared her for the demands of moving long distances with heavy loads. Sarah's infiltration route took her through dense forest and across several streams before reaching the area where she would establish her observation post. She moved slowly and carefully, using natural concealment and avoiding areas where she might leave tracks or other signs of her passage. The movement took most of the night, but Sarah reached her intended position before dawn. From her concealed position, Sarah could observe the target compound approximately 900 meters away. She established her shooting position carefully, ensuring that she had clear fields of fire while remaining invisible to anyone in the compound or the surrounding area. She used natural vegetation and artificial camouflage to break up her outline and blend into the forest environment. Sarah spent the first day conducting detailed surveillance of the compound, noting the activities and movements of various individuals. She identified guards, support personnel, and potential high-value targets, documenting everything in a logbook that would be reviewed by the instructors after the exercise. The target Sarah was looking for was described as a middle-aged man with distinctive facial features who would be wearing civilian clothing. The challenge was distinguishing him from other individuals in the compound who might have similar characteristics. Sarah had to be absolutely certain of her target identification before taking any shot. On the second day of the exercise, Sarah's patience was rewarded when she observed a figure matching the target description entering the compound's main building. Through her scope, she was able to confirm the individual's identity by comparing his features with the photographs provided in her mission briefing. This was her target. Sarah spent several hours waiting for the optimal shot opportunity. The target moved frequently between buildings, often surrounded by other individuals who would make a clean shot difficult. Sarah needed a moment when the target was isolated and clearly visible, with no risk of collateral damage to other personnel in the compound. The opportunity came late in the afternoon when the target stepped onto a balcony overlooking the compound's courtyard. He was alone and clearly visible, standing in a position that provided Sarah with an unobstructed shot. The distance was approximately 875 meters, well within her capabilities, but requiring careful consideration of wind conditions and the late afternoon lighting. Sarah controlled her breathing, acquired the target in her scope, and made the final adjustments for distance and wind. She had one shot to complete the mission successfully, and she knew that missing would result in immediate failure of the exercise. She pressed the trigger smoothly, and the shot struck the target precisely where she had aimed. The target immediately dropped out of sight, and Sarah quickly began her extraction from the area. The exercise required her to leave the area undetected and reach a designated extraction point several kilometers away. The opposing force would immediately begin searching for her once the shot was detected, and she had to move quickly while maintaining her concealment. Sarah's extraction route took her through different terrain than her infiltration route, as she knew the opposing force would focus their search efforts along the most obvious escape paths. She moved carefully but quickly, using her knowledge of tracking and counter-tracking techniques to avoid leaving signs of her passage. The extraction phase of the mission took nearly 12 hours, with Sarah moving primarily during darkness and remaining hidden during daylight hours. She reached the designated extraction point within the required time limit, having successfully completed every phase of the exercise without being detected by the opposing force. When the exercise ended, Master Sergeant Hayes personally conducted Sarah's debrief. He reviewed her planning, execution, and extraction in detail, noting both her successes and areas where she could improve. His feedback was thorough and professional, focused entirely on her performance rather than any personal characteristics. Martinez, Master Sergeant Hayes said at the conclusion of the debrief, "You executed that mission with the kind of precision and professionalism I expect from my best students. Your planning was thorough, your shot execution was flawless, and your extraction demonstrated good tactical thinking. You should be proud of your performance." Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction and relief. The final exercise had been the culmination of 8 weeks of intensive training, and she had met every challenge successfully. However, she also knew that graduation from sniper school was not guaranteed until the final day of the program. The last week of sniper school consisted of final examinations, both written and practical, that tested every aspect of the curriculum. Sarah studied intensively for the written exams, which cover ballistics, meteorology, tactics, and equipment. She also participated in final shooting tests that required her to demonstrate her marksmanship skills under various conditions. When graduation day arrived, Sarah stood in formation with 13 other soldiers who had successfully completed the program. 10 students had been eliminated during the 8-week course, unable to meet the demanding standards required for graduation. Sarah felt a tremendous sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had earned her place among the Army's elite snipers through dedication, skill, and perseverance. Master Sergeant Hayes addressed the graduating class with words that Sarah would remember for the rest of her military career. "You are now qualified Army snipers, but remember that this graduation is not the end of your training. It is the beginning. You will continue to learn and improve throughout your careers, and you'll be called upon to perform missions that require the highest levels of skill and professionalism. I expect you to uphold the standards and traditions of the Army sniper community." As Sarah received her graduation certificate and sniper badge, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. From her early days shooting with her grandfather to her combat experiences in Afghanistan, every step had prepared her for this achievement. She was now officially qualified as an Army sniper, but she knew that the real test would come when she was assigned to a unit and called upon to use her skills in support of combat operations 3 months after graduating from sniper school. Sarah received orders that would change the trajectory of her military career forever. She was being assigned to the 1st Special Forces Group at Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington, where she would work as a sniper in support of special operations missions. This assignment represented a significant step forward in her career, as Special Forces units typically only accepted the most highly qualified personnel. The 1st Special Forces Group was preparing for deployment to Syria, where they would be conducting counterterrorism operations against ISIS forces. The mission requirements would be significantly different from Sarah's previous deployment to Afghanistan, with an emphasis on urban warfare, close-quarters combat, and operations in densely populated areas. When Sarah arrived at Joint Base Lewis McChord, she was immediately struck by the professional atmosphere and the high level of preparation evident in the unit. The soldiers were more experienced, better equipped, and more focused than those she had worked with in conventional infantry units. She also noticed that the Special Forces community was even more male-dominated than the regular Army, and she anticipated that earning acceptance would require proving herself once again. Sarah was assigned to Alpha Company, 1st Battalion, where she would work directly with Special Forces teams conducting direct action missions. Her role would be to provide precision fire support during raids and to conduct surveillance and reconnaissance missions in support of larger operations. It was exactly the kind of assignment she had been hoping for throughout her military career. Captain Michael Stevens, the company commander, had specifically requested Sarah for his unit based on her performance in Afghanistan and her graduation from sniper school. Captain Stevens had served multiple deployments with Special Operations Forces and understood the value of having skilled snipers integrated into his teams. He was also one of the few officers who actively sought to integrate qualified female soldiers into Special Operations roles. Sergeant Martinez, Captain Stevens said during their initial meeting, "I requested you for this assignment because I believe you can contribute significantly to our mission effectiveness. However, I want you to understand that the standards here are higher than anything you've experienced before. We operate in small teams, often without backup, and every member of the team must be capable of performing multiple roles under extreme pressure." Sarah appreciated the direct communication and the clear expectations. She had learned throughout her military career that honest feedback and realistic expectations were preferable to false encouragement or unclear standards. She was confident in her abilities, but she also understood that special operations would test her skills in new ways. Sarah's introduction to the Special Forces community came through an intensive train-up period that lasted 6 weeks. The training covered advanced marksmanship techniques, urban warfare tactics, close-quarters battle procedures, and specialized equipment operation. Sarah was introduced to weapons systems she had never used before, including the M200 Enhanced Sniper Rifle, which would become her primary weapon during deployment. The M200 was a significant upgrade from the M24 rifle Sarah had used previously. Chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum, the weapon was capable of accurate fire at distances exceeding 1,200 meters and was specifically designed for military sniper operations. The weapon system included advanced optics, suppressor capabilities, and modular components that could be adjusted for different mission requirements. Sarah spent countless hours familiarizing herself with the M200, learning its capabilities and limitations under various conditions. She practiced shooting at extended ranges in urban environments and from unconventional firing positions. The weapon's increased power and range opened up new tactical possibilities, but it also required more precise shooting techniques and a deeper understanding of long-range ballistics. During the train-up period, Sarah worked closely with Master Sergeant David Rodriguez, a veteran Special Forces sniper with over 15 years of experience. Master Sergeant Rodriguez had initially been skeptical about working with a female sniper, but he was committed to giving Sarah a fair evaluation based on her performance rather than his preconceptions. Martinez, Master Sergeant Rodriguez, said during one of their training sessions, "I've worked with a lot of snipers over the years, and I can tell you that technical proficiency is only part of what makes someone successful in this business. The mental aspects, patience, decision-making under pressure, and the ability to work effectively as part of a team are just as important as shooting skills." Sarah understood the message behind his words. She would need to demonstrate not just her marksmanship abilities, but also her capacity to function effectively in the high-stress environment of special operations. She was determined to prove that she belonged in this elite community and could contribute meaningfully to mission success. One of the most challenging aspects of the train-up was learning to work effectively with Special Forces teams. These units operated with a level of autonomy and initiative that was different from conventional military units. Team members were expected to think independently, adapt to changing situations quickly, and take ownership of mission outcomes in ways that required exceptional judgment and maturity. Sarah participated in numerous training exercises designed to simulate the missions they would encounter in Syria. These exercises involved complex scenarios with multiple objectives, time constraints, and variables that required constant adaptation and problem-solving. Sarah's role as a sniper was critical to mission success, but she also had to be prepared to perform other functions when needed. During one particularly challenging exercise, Sarah's team was tasked with conducting a raid on a simulated ISIS safe house in an urban environment. The mission required careful planning, precise timing, and coordination between multiple elements. Sarah would provide overwatch from a building approximately 400 meters from the target, while the assault team moved in to capture or eliminate high-value targets. The exercise took place in a mock urban environment that closely replicated the conditions they would face in Syria. The buildings were multi-story structures with complex layouts, and the scenario included civilian role players who added realism and complexity to the tactical situation. Sarah had to distinguish between combatants and non-combatants while providing precision fire support for the assault team. As the exercise began, Sarah established her position on the roof of a building that provided clear observation of the target area. She used her spotting scope to conduct detailed surveillance of the target building, identifying potential threats and escape routes. Her communication with the assault team was constant, providing real-time intelligence about activities in and around the target. When the assault team moved to their final positions, Sarah identified several armed individuals in the target building who posed immediate threats to the approaching soldiers. Using her M200 rifle, she engaged these targets with precision shots that eliminated the threats without risking injury to nearby civilians or friendly forces. Her shooting was accurate and decisive, allowing the assault team to complete their mission safely. The exercise demonstrated Sarah's ability to operate effectively in the complex urban environment they would encounter in Syria. Her shooting skills were excellent, but more importantly, she showed good judgment in target selection and an understanding of the broader tactical situation. The exercise controllers noted her performance, and she received positive feedback from the team members she had supported. As the train-up period neared completion, Sarah felt increasingly confident in her abilities and her fit with the Special Forces community. The training had been demanding, but she had met every challenge successfully. She had also begun to develop working relationships with the team members she would deploy with, earning their respect through consistent professional performance. However, Sarah also understood that training exercises, no matter how realistic, were fundamentally different from actual combat operations. The deployment to Syria would present challenges that couldn't be fully replicated in training environments. She would be operating in a hostile environment where mistakes could have life-or-death consequences, not just for herself, but for the team members who would depend on her skills and judgment. The briefings about their upcoming mission area painted a picture of a complex and dangerous environment. ISIS forces controlled significant territory in Syria and had demonstrated sophisticated capabilities in urban warfare, improvised explosive devices, and asymmetric tactics. The civilian population was caught in the middle of the conflict, creating additional complications for American forces trying to distinguish between combatants and non-combatants. Sarah's team would be operating from a forward operating base near the Syrian border, conducting missions throughout the region. Their primary objectives would include capturing or eliminating high-value ISIS leaders, disrupting enemy command and control networks, and gathering intelligence about enemy capabilities and intentions. The missions would typically involve small teams operating independently for extended periods with minimal backup or support. 1 week before deployment, Sarah participated in a final exercise that tested the team's readiness for their upcoming mission. The exercise scenario was based on actual intelligence about ISIS tactics and capabilities, and it required the team to adapt to changing conditions and unexpected complications. Sarah's performance during this final test would be crucial to her acceptance as a full member of the team. The exercise began with the team receiving intelligence about a high-value ISIS leader who was reportedly meeting with other commanders in a compound near the Syrian border. The team was tasked with conducting surveillance of the meeting and either capturing the individuals or eliminating them if capture wasn't feasible. The intelligence was time-sensitive, and the team had to move quickly to take advantage of the opportunity. Sarah's role in the mission was to establish an overwatch position that would allow her to observe the target compound and provide precision fire support if needed. The compound was located in an urban area with multiple escape routes, and Sarah's position would be critical to preventing high-value targets from escaping if the mission was compromised. The team inserted by helicopter several kilometers from the target area and moved through urban terrain to reach their objectives. Sarah carried her M200 rifle along with additional equipment for the multi-day mission, including advanced optics, communication gear, and survival equipment. The weight of her equipment was substantial, but her physical conditioning and experience allowed her to keep pace with the rest of the team. Sarah established her overwatch position in a partially destroyed building that provided excellent observation of the target compound, while offering concealment and multiple escape routes if her position was compromised. She spent several hours conducting detailed surveillance of the area, noting the movements of various individuals and identifying potential targets. The exercise reached its climax when role players representing ISIS commanders arrived at the target compound for their simulated meeting. Sarah observed the individuals through her scope and confirmed their identities using photographs provided in the mission briefing. She maintained constant communication with the assault team, providing updates about the number and locations of targets in the compound. When the assault team moved in to capture the targets, the exercise scenario called for some of the role players to resist and attempt to escape. Sarah had to make split-second decisions about which individuals to engage and which to allow the ground forces to handle. Her shots had to be precise to avoid hitting friendly forces or civilians in the crowded urban environment. Sarah's performance during the final exercise exceeded expectations. Her shooting was accurate and timely. Her communication was clear and professional, and her tactical judgment demonstrated a mature understanding of the complexities of special operations. The exercise controllers and team leaders were unanimous in their assessment that she was ready for deployment. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, who had been observing Sarah's development throughout the train-up period, approached her after the exercise with feedback that meant more to her than any official evaluation. "Martinez," he said, "I want you to know that I had doubts about working with a female sniper when you first arrived here. Those doubts had nothing to do with you personally. They were based on my own limited experience and probably some unfair assumptions. You've proven that those doubts were unfounded, and I'm proud to have you as part of this team." The acknowledgement from Master Sergeant Rodriguez was significant because it represented acceptance from someone whose opinion carried weight in the Special Forces community. Sarah understood that earning the respect of veteran operators like Rodriguez was one of the most important aspects of integrating into Special Operations units. As the deployment date approached, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that was familiar from her previous combat deployment. However, this time she felt more confident in her abilities and more secure in her role within the unit. The extensive training and preparation had given her the skills and knowledge needed for the mission, but more importantly, she had earned the trust and respect of her teammates. The night before departure, Sarah spent time writing letters to her family and reviewing her equipment one final time. She thought about her grandfather, who had started her on the path that led to this moment, and wished he could have seen how far she had come. She also thought about the female soldiers who would come after her, and her responsibility to perform successfully so that future opportunities would be available for other qualified women. The deployment to Syria would be Sarah's most challenging assignment yet, but she was ready for whatever missions awaited her team. She had proven herself capable of operating at the highest levels of military professionalism, and she was determined to continue that tradition during the upcoming deployment. The complex urban environment and sophisticated enemy they would face would test every skill she had developed, but Sarah was confident that her preparation and experience had given her the tools needed for success. The Syrian desert stretched endlessly in all directions as Sarah's helicopter approached Forward Operating Base Sentinel, a small but heavily fortified outpost 50 kilometers from the Syrian border. The landscape below was harsh and unforgiving, dotted with the remnants of ancient civilizations and the scars of modern warfare. This would be her home for the next 8 months as she and her team conducted some of the most dangerous missions in the ongoing fight against ISIS. Colonel Patricia Williams was conducting her monthly inspection of Forward Operating Base Sentinel when she first heard about Sergeant Sarah Martinez. The colonel had served 22 years in the Army, including multiple combat deployments, and she had worked hard to advance the integration of qualified female soldiers into combat roles. She was particularly interested in how female soldiers were performing in special operations assignments. Captain Stevens, Colonel Williams, said during their briefing, "I understand you have a female sniper assigned to your unit. How is she performing in this environment?" Captain Stevens had been expecting this question. "Ma'am, Sergeant Martinez has exceeded every expectation since arriving here. She's conducted 17 missions with my teams, and her performance has been outstanding. The soldiers she works with have complete confidence in her abilities." Colonel Williams made a note to observe Sergeant Martinez during operations when possible. The integration of women into special operations roles was still controversial within the military, and success stories like this one were important for demonstrating the value of qualified female soldiers in these positions. Sarah's first mission in Syria took place 3 days after arriving at FOB Sentinel. Intelligence had identified a high-value ISIS commander who was coordinating attacks against coalition forces from a compound in the city of Al-Hasaka. Sarah's team was tasked with conducting surveillance of the compound and eliminating the target if an opportunity presented itself. The mission required infiltrating deep into ISIS-controlled territory and establishing an observation post in an urban environment where they would be surrounded by potential enemies. Sarah would be responsible for long-range surveillance and precision fire support while the rest of the team gathered intelligence and provided security. The team inserted by helicopter under cover of darkness, landing several kilometers from their objective and moving through hostile territory on foot. Sarah carried her M200 rifle configured with a powerful day/night scope that would allow her to observe targets at distances exceeding 1,500 meters. The weapon system was equipped with a suppressor to reduce the signature of her shots and increase her survivability in the urban environment. Sarah and her team established their observation post in a damaged apartment building that provided excellent views of the target compound, while offering multiple escape routes if their position was compromised. The building had been abandoned during earlier fighting, but ISIS patrols moved through the area regularly, requiring the team to maintain absolute noise and light discipline. For 3 days, Sarah conducted continuous surveillance of the target compound, documenting the movements and activities of various individuals. She used advanced optics to identify faces from long range, comparing what she observed with photographs of known ISIS commanders. The intelligence gathered during these observations would be valuable even if they never had an opportunity to engage the primary target. On the 4th day of the mission, Sarah's patience was rewarded when she observed a figure matching the description of their high-value target entering the compound. The individual was accompanied by several bodyguards and appeared to be conducting a meeting with other ISIS leaders. This was potentially the opportunity they had been waiting for. Sarah confirmed the target's identity through careful observation and comparison with intelligence photographs. The distance to the target was approximately 1,180 meters, which was well within the capabilities of her weapon system, but would require precise shooting to account for environmental conditions and the urban environment. She had a clear shot, but she needed authorization from the team leader before engaging. Overwatch, this is Alpha 6, came the voice of Master Sergeant Rodriguez over the radio. You are cleared to engage the primary target. Take the shot when ready. Sarah controlled her breathing and settled into her shooting position. The target was visible through a window in the compound's main building, apparently unaware that he was being observed from over a kilometer away. Sarah made final adjustments to her scope, accounting for the range, wind conditions, and the slight elevation difference between her position and the target. The shot was perfect, striking the target precisely where Sarah had aimed. Through her scope, she could see the immediate reaction in the compound as other individuals realized what had happened. Security personnel began moving quickly through the building, searching for threats, while other figures attempted to provide aid to the fallen target. Sarah quickly scanned for additional targets of opportunity, but found none that met the engagement criteria established for the mission. The team's primary objective had been accomplished with a single shot, and they now needed to extract from the area before ISIS forces could organize a response. The enemy would certainly conduct an extensive search for the sniper who had eliminated their commander. The extraction from Al-Hasaka took 18 hours, with the team moving carefully through ISIS-controlled territory while avoiding enemy patrols and checkpoints. Sarah's successful engagement of the high-value target had eliminated an important enemy commander, but it had also alerted ISIS forces to the presence of American special operations teams in the area. The enemy would be more vigilant and aggressive in their security measures. Word of Sarah's successful mission spread quickly throughout the special operations community in Syria. A single-shot elimination of a high-value target at over 1,100 meters in an urban environment was exactly the kind of precision operation that demonstrated the value of highly trained snipers. The mission also highlighted Sarah's ability to operate effectively in the complex and dangerous environment of the Syrian conflict. Colonel Williams made a note to review the after-action report from Sarah's mission. A successful long-range engagement in urban terrain against a high-value target was noteworthy regardless of who had made the shot, but the fact that it had been accomplished by a female sniper made it particularly significant for her ongoing assessment of women in combat roles. Over the following months, Sarah participated in numerous missions throughout Syria, ranging from direct action raids to extended reconnaissance operations. She worked with different special forces teams depending on mission requirements, and her reputation for precision shooting and tactical competence continued to grow. The soldiers she worked with came to rely on her abilities and to value her contributions to mission success. One particularly challenging mission took place in the city of Raqqa, which had been the de facto capital of the ISIS caliphate before its liberation by coalition forces. Intelligence indicated that ISIS was attempting to re-establish a command structure in the city, and Sarah's team was tasked with disrupting these efforts through targeted elimination of key personnel. The mission required establishing multiple observation posts throughout the city and conducting coordinated strikes against ISIS leaders who were attempting to rebuild their organization. Sarah would be responsible for one of the most challenging targets, a bomb maker who had been responsible for numerous attacks against coalition forces and civilian populations. The target was known to move frequently between safe houses and to employ extensive security measures to avoid detection. Sarah's team had a narrow window of opportunity when intelligence indicated the bomb maker would be meeting with other ISIS operatives in a specific location. The meeting was scheduled to last only a few hours, and the team would have one chance to eliminate the target before he disappeared again. Sarah established her firing position in a clock tower that provided excellent observation of the target area, but required her to climb 8 stories of damaged stairs while carrying her full equipment load. The position offered clear fields of fire at ranges up to 1,400 meters, but it also presented significant risks if her location was detected by enemy forces. The target appeared at the designated location exactly as intelligence had predicted, arriving with a small security detail and entering a building where the meeting was to take place. Sarah confirmed the target's identity through careful observation and prepared for a shot that would need to be taken through a window of the building where the meeting was occurring. The technical challenges of the shot were significant. The target was approximately 1,285 meters away, and Sarah would be shooting through glass at an angle that might affect bullet trajectory. The urban environment created unpredictable wind patterns, and the late afternoon lighting conditions would make target identification more difficult. Sarah had to account for all these variables while maintaining the element of surprise. Sarah waited patiently for the optimal shot opportunity, monitoring the target's movements through her scope while maintaining communication with her team. After nearly 3 hours of observation, the target moved to a position near a window where Sarah had a clear shot without significant obstructions. The shot struck the target accurately, eliminating the bomb maker who had been responsible for numerous attacks against coalition forces. Sarah immediately began scanning for additional targets, but found that the other meeting participants had taken cover quickly after the initial shot. The team's primary objective had been accomplished, and they needed to extract before ISIS security forces could respond. The extraction from Raqqa was complicated by the urban environment and the presence of numerous ISIS sympathizers who might provide information about American forces in the area. Sarah's team moved carefully through the city, using predetermined routes and maintaining constant communication with supporting elements. The mission was ultimately successful, with the team returning to base without casualties and having eliminated a high-value target. Colonel Williams was reviewing mission reports in her office when she came across the after-action report from the RAC operation. The report described Sarah's successful engagement of the bomb maker at 1,285 meters through urban terrain, noting the technical difficulty of the shot and the mission's strategic importance. The colonel was impressed by the precision and professionalism described in the report. "This is exceptional work," Colonel Williams remarked to her intelligence officer. "A 1,285-meter shot through an urban environment against a target using cover and concealment. That's the kind of precision we need in these operations." The intelligence officer nodded in agreement. Sergeant Martinez has been consistently delivering results like this throughout her deployment. The Special Forces teams request her specifically for high-priority missions because of her reliability and accuracy. Colonel Williams made a decision that would have significant implications for Sarah's career. She instructed her staff to prepare a recommendation for Sarah to receive specialized training on the CheyTac M200 intervention rifle, one of the most advanced long-range precision weapons in the American military inventory. The weapon was capable of accurate fire at distances exceeding 2,500 meters and was reserved for the most skilled and experienced snipers. The CheyTac M200 was chambered in .408 CheyTac, a cartridge specifically designed for extreme long-range shooting. The weapon system included advanced optics, ballistic computers, and precision components that made it capable of accuracy that was simply not possible with conventional sniper rifles. Only a select few snipers in the military were qualified to use the weapon system. Training on the CheyTac M200 took place at a specialized facility in Nevada, where snipers learned to use the weapon's advanced capabilities for extreme long-range engagements. The course was highly technical, covering advanced ballistics, environmental analysis, and shooting techniques specific to ultra-long-range shooting. The physical and mental demands of the training were substantial. Sarah arrived at the training facility with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She understood that being selected for CheyTac training was a significant honor and a recognition of her abilities as a sniper. However, she also knew that the training would push her skills to their absolute limits, and that not all students successfully completed the program. The instructor for the CheyTac course was Master Sergeant Thomas Anderson, a legendary figure in the sniper community who held several records for long-range shooting. His experience included deployments in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria, where he had made some of the longest confirmed kills in military history. His standards for students were notoriously high. "Ladies and gentlemen," Master Sergeant Anderson addressed the 12 students selected for the course. "You are here because you have demonstrated exceptional abilities as military snipers. However, shooting accurately at distances exceeding 2,000 meters requires a completely different level of precision and understanding. Some of you will not successfully complete this training, and that is not a reflection of your value as snipers. It simply means that extreme long-range shooting is not your specialty." The first week of training focused on understanding the ballistics and capabilities of the CheyTac weapon system. Students learned about the unique characteristics of the .408 CheyTac cartridge, the effects of environmental conditions on ultra-long-range shooting, and the use of advanced ballistic computers for trajectory calculation. The academic portion of the training was intensive and required mastery of complex mathematical calculations. Sarah excelled in the academic portions of the training, drawing on her extensive background in ballistics and her natural aptitude for mathematics. She had always been fascinated by the science of long-range shooting, and the CheyTac system represented the ultimate application of ballistic principles. She spent her evenings studying the technical manuals and practicing calculations until they became second nature. The practical shooting phase of the training began during the second week, with students attempting shots at distances ranging from 1,500 to 2,800 meters. The Nevada desert provided ideal conditions for long-range shooting, with clear visibility and predictable wind patterns. However, the distances involved required a level of precision that challenged even the most experienced snipers. Sarah's first shots with the CheyTac system were at 1,800 meters, a distance that exceeded any shot she had made previously. The weapon felt different from the rifle she was accustomed to, heavier, more powerful, and requiring more precise handling. The scope magnification was higher than anything she had used before, and the ballistic computer provided data that needed to be interpreted and applied correctly. Her initial shots were close to the target, but not accurate enough to meet the Corps standards. Sarah realized that she needed to adjust her shooting techniques to account for the weapon's unique characteristics. She spent additional time on the range, working with instructors to refine her technique and develop the consistency required for ultra-long-range shooting. By the end of the second week, Sarah was hitting targets consistently at 2,000 meters, demonstrating the precision required for successful completion of the course. Her improvement was noted by the instructors, who were impressed by her ability to adapt her shooting technique to the demands of the CheyTac system. The final test of the course was a shot at 2,850 meters, nearly 3 kilometers. This was at the extreme edge of the weapon's capabilities and required perfect execution of every aspect of long-range shooting. Environmental conditions had to be read precisely, ballistic calculations had to be exact, and the shooting technique had to be flawless. Sarah approached the final test with the same methodical preparation that had characterized her entire military career. She spent an hour analyzing environmental conditions, calculating ballistic data, and preparing her equipment. The target was barely visible even through the high-powered scope, appearing as a small dot against the desert landscape. The shot required Sarah to account for a significant bullet drop over the 2,850-meter distance, as well as wind drift and the effects of air density at the Nevada elevation. She made careful adjustments to her scope, controlled her breathing, and fired. The bullet traveled for nearly 4 seconds before reaching the target, striking precisely where Sarah had aimed. Master Sergeant Anderson verified the hit through his spotting scope and announced the result to the other students. Ladies and gentlemen, Sergeant Martinez has just made a confirmed hit at 2,850 meters. That shot demonstrates the level of precision we expect from graduates of this program. Sarah felt a surge of pride and accomplishment as she realized she had successfully completed one of the most challenging shooting courses in the military. The 2,850-meter shot represented the culmination of years of training, experience, and dedication to the craft of precision marksmanship. More importantly, it demonstrated her ability to master new weapon systems and adapt to the most demanding requirements. When Colonel Williams received word that Sergeant Martinez had successfully completed CheyTac training and achieved a qualifying shot at 2,850 meters, she immediately recognized the significance of this accomplishment. Very few snipers in the military were capable of accurate shooting at such extreme distances, and Sarah had joined an elite group of specialists. This is exactly the kind of capability we need for future operations, Colonel Williams told her staff. Sergeant Martinez has demonstrated exceptional skills and the ability to master advanced weapon systems. She represents the best of what our military can produce when we give qualified personnel the opportunity to excel. Colonel Williams made a decision that would validate everything Sarah had worked toward throughout her military career. She recommended Sarah for assignment to a classified special operations unit that specialized in extreme long-range precision missions. The assignment would represent the pinnacle of her career as a military sniper and would place her among the most elite soldiers in the American military. Sarah's journey from a small-town girl shooting with her grandfather to an elite special operations sniper had taken nearly a decade. Along the way, she had overcome skepticism, proved her abilities repeatedly, and earned the respect of some of the most experienced soldiers in the military. Her success had opened doors for other qualified female soldiers and had demonstrated that excellence in military service was determined by skill, dedication, and character rather than gender. As Sarah prepared for her new assignment, she reflected on the path that had brought her to this point. Every challenge, Every mission and every shot had contributed to her development as a soldier and as a person. She thought about her grandfather, who had started her on this journey, and she knew he would have been proud of what she had accomplished. The notification of Sarah's new assignment came with a commendation from Colonel Williams that would become part of her permanent military record. Sergeant Martinez represents the highest standards of military professionalism and technical competence. Her achievements as a precision marksman, including her qualification at extreme long-range distances, demonstrate the value of providing opportunities for all qualified personnel regardless of background. She has earned her place among America's most elite soldiers through skill, dedication, and exceptional performance in combat operations. Sarah's story had become more than just a personal journey. It had become a demonstration of what was possible when talent, opportunity, and determination came together. Her success would inspire other young women to pursue military careers in non-traditional roles, and her example would help change attitudes about the capabilities of female soldiers in combat positions. The CheyTac qualification badge that Sarah now wore represented more than just marksmanship skills. It represented years of perseverance, countless hours of training, and the courage to pursue her goals despite obstacles and skepticism. When Colonel Williams finally met Sarah in person, she saw a soldier who embodied the best traditions of the American military: dedication to excellence, commitment to mission success, and the integrity to earn respect through performance rather than seek it through politics or favoritism. As Sarah prepared for her next chapter in special operations, she carried with her the lessons learned from every mentor, every challenge, and every mission. She had proven that she belonged among America's most elite warriors, and she was ready to continue serving her country at the highest levels of military professionalism. The journey that had begun with a teenage girl shooting targets with her grandfather had culminated in her recognition as one of the military's most skilled precision marksmen, capable of making shots that few soldiers in history had ever attempted. Much less accomplished Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls her age. While her classmates spent their afternoons at the mall or practicing cheerleading routines, Sarah could be found at the local shooting range with her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran who taught her that precision wasn't just about hitting a target. It was about understanding wind, distance, breathing, and most importantly, patience. Growing up in rural Montana, Sarah learned to shoot before she learned to drive. Her grandfather's old hunting rifle became an extension of her arms, and by the time she turned 16, she could hit a quarter-sized target at 300 yards consistently. The local hunters often joked that Sarah could outshoot most of them, but they said it with the kind of dismissive laughter that suggested they didn't really believe a teenage girl could be that good. When Sarah announced her intention to join the military after high school, her family wasn't surprised. What surprised them was her determination to become a sniper. Her parents worried about their daughter entering such a dangerous and male-dominated field, but Sarah's mind was made up. She had read every book about military snipers she could find, studied ballistics tables until she could recite them from memory, and practiced shooting in all weather conditions. Basic training at Fort Benning was everything Sarah expected and more. The physical demands pushed her to her limits, but she never complained. While some of her fellow recruits struggled with the shooting portions of their training, Sarah excelled. Her drill sergeants noticed her exceptional marksmanship abilities, but they also noticed something else: the way her male counterparts treated her. Despite consistently outscoring most of the men in her unit during shooting exercises, Sarah found herself being overlooked when it came to opportunities for advanced training. When positions opened up for sniper school consideration, her name wasn't on the list. The reasoning was always the same. They needed someone with more experience, someone who could handle the pressure, someone who could carry the heavy equipment over long distances. After completing basic training and advanced individual training, Sarah was assigned to the 75th Ranger Regiment as a designated marksman. It wasn't the sniper position she had hoped for, but it was a step in the right direction. The regiment was preparing for deployment to Afghanistan, and Sarah knew this would be her chance to prove herself in real combat situations. The other soldiers in her unit were professional but distant. They acknowledged her shooting skills, but treated them as a novelty rather than a valuable asset. Staff Sergeant Mike Thompson, her squad leader, was fair but skeptical. He had served 3 tours in Afghanistan and had never worked with a female sniper. His experience told him that combat was no place for experimentation with unit dynamics. During pre-deployment training at Fort Bragg, Sarah's unit practiced various scenarios they might encounter in Afghanistan. Urban warfare, mountain operations, and desert patrol tactics were drilled repeatedly. Sarah excelled in every exercise, particularly those involving long-range target identification and elimination. Her ability to read environmental conditions and adjust for variables like wind speed, temperature, and humidity was uncanny. One particular training exercise involved a simulated village clearing operation. Sarah was positioned on Overwatch, providing sniper support for her squad as they moved through the mock village. The exercise called for her to neutralize several targets at distances ranging from 400 to 800 meters while her teammates advanced on foot. As Sarah settled into her position behind her M24 sniper weapon system, she felt the familiar calm that always came over her when she was behind a rifle. The weight of the weapon, the feel of the stock against her cheek, and the clarity of the scope's view all combined to create a sense of complete focus. She controlled her breathing, calculated the wind drift, and began engaging targets. One by one, Sarah's shots found their marks with mechanical precision. The training instructors monitoring the exercise were impressed by her accuracy, but more importantly, they noticed her ability to communicate effectively with her advancing squad. She provided clear, concise updates on enemy positions and potential threats, demonstrating that she understood her role as more than just a shooter. Despite her performance during training, Sarah still felt like an outsider in her unit. The conversations often stopped when she approached, and she was rarely included in the informal discussions about tactics and strategy that happened after official training sessions ended. She understood that trust in military units was earned through shared experiences, particularly combat experiences, but the exclusion still stung. Captain James Rodriguez, the company commander, had been watching Sarah's progress with interest. He had served with female soldiers before and understood the unique challenges they faced in proving themselves. Captain Rodriguez also understood the value of having skilled marksmen in his unit, regardless of their gender. He made a note to keep a close eye on how Sarah performed during their upcoming deployment. The weeks leading up to deployment were filled with equipment checks, briefings, and final preparations. Sarah spent extra time familiarizing herself with the terrain and climate conditions they would encounter in Afghanistan. She studied satellite images of their area of operations, memorized the ballistic table for the ammunition they would be using, and practiced shooting at various elevations to simulate the mountainous terrain they would face. When the deployment orders finally came, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This was what she had been training for her entire military career. She knew that combat would test not just her shooting skills, but her mental toughness, decision-making abilities, and capacity to work effectively under pressure. Most importantly, she knew that her performance in Afghanistan would determine whether she would ever get the chance to attend sniper school and pursue her dream of becoming a fully qualified military sniper. The flight to Afghanistan was long and uncomfortable, but Sarah used the time to review her equipment and run through mental exercises her grandfather had taught her. He had always said that the mind was the most important weapon a sniper possessed, and Sarah was determined to prove him right. As their transport aircraft descended toward Bagram Airfield, Sarah looked out the small window at the rugged landscape below. The mountains stretched endlessly in all directions, their peaks covered with snow even in the middle of summer. She thought about her grandfather, who had passed away 2 years earlier, and wondered what advice he would give her if he were still alive. She could almost hear his voice telling her to trust her training, stay focused, and never let anyone convince her that she wasn't good enough. The aircraft touched down with a jarring thud, and Sarah felt her stomach drop. This was it, her chance to prove that gender didn't matter when it came to protecting American soldiers and completing the mission. She grabbed her gear and followed her squad off the aircraft, stepping into the harsh Afghan sun for the first time. The base at Bagram was a sprawling complex of tents, prefabricated buildings, and defensive positions. The smell of diesel fuel and dust filled the air, and the constant noise of helicopters and vehicles created a backdrop of organized chaos. Sarah was assigned to a tent with 3 other soldiers, all male, who were polite but not particularly welcoming. During their first week in Afghanistan, Sarah's unit conducted several patrol missions to familiarize themselves with their area of operations. These patrols were relatively routine, designed more to show an American presence than to engage enemy forces. Sarah carried her M200 rifle on every patrol, but the opportunities to use her specialized skills were limited. On their 4th patrol, Sarah's unit encountered their first real taste of combat. They were conducting a routine sweep through a valley suspected of harboring Taliban fighters when they came under fire from positions in the surrounding hills. The initial attack was brief, but intense, with automatic weapons fire coming from at least 3 different directions. Staff Sergeant Thompson immediately called for his soldiers to take cover and return fire. Sarah found herself behind a large boulder, her rifle ready, but without a clear target. The enemy positions were well concealed, and the incoming fire was accurate enough to keep her squad pinned down. She could hear Thompson on the radio, calling for air support and reporting their situation to headquarters. As Sarah scanned the hillsides through her scope, she caught a glimpse of muzzle flash from a position approximately 600 meters away. The shooter was well hidden behind a rock formation, but Sarah could see enough of his position to get an accurate shot. She called out the target location to Thompson, but he was focused on coordinating their response and didn't seem to hear her. Sarah made a decision that would later prove to be significant. Without waiting for specific orders, she adjusted her scope for the distance and environmental conditions, controlled her breathing, and fired. The shot was true, and the muzzle flashes from that position immediately ceased. She quickly scanned for other targets and identified a second enemy position about 750 meters away. The second shot was more challenging due to the increased distance and the fact that the target was moving between covered positions. Sarah had to lead the target and account for the bullet's travel time. She fired, and again the enemy fire from that position stopped. Within minutes, the remaining enemy fighters had withdrawn, leaving Sarah's squad free to continue their mission. Despite her successful engagement of enemy targets, Sarah's actions received little acknowledgement from her squad mates. Staff Sergeant Thompson noted her performance in his after-action report, but there was no discussion of her shooting or its impact on the mission's success. Sarah realized that she would need to prove herself repeatedly before her skills would be fully recognized and valued. The pattern continued over the following weeks. Sarah's unit conducted numerous patrols and engaged enemy forces on several occasions. Each time, Sarah's marksmanship proved valuable, but each time her contributions seemed to be minimized or overlooked. She began to understand that proving herself in combat was only half the battle. The other half was changing the attitudes and perceptions of her fellow soldiers. One evening, while cleaning her rifle after a particularly challenging patrol, Sarah was approached by Corporal Danny Wu, one of the newer soldiers in their unit. Wu was young and eager, and unlike some of the more experienced soldiers, he didn't seem to have preconceived notions about female soldiers. "That was some nice shooting today," Wu said, sitting down on a nearby crate. "I saw you take out that sniper in the tower from about 800 meters. How did you even see him?" Sarah looked up from her rifle, surprised by the compliment. "Training and patience," she replied. "Most people look for movement, but sometimes you have to look for what doesn't belong. That tower had been empty every other time we passed it, so when I saw a shadow that wasn't quite right, I knew something was there." Wu nodded thoughtfully. "I've been watching you on these patrols. You see things the rest of us miss. Have you ever thought about trying for sniper school? Sarah almost laughed. I've been trying to get into sniper school since I enlisted. The problem is getting someone to recommend me for the training. Apparently, being able to consistently hit targets at long range isn't enough qualification. Their conversation was interrupted by Staff Sergeant Thompson, who approached with a serious expression on his face. Martinez, woo, pack your gear. We've got a mission briefing in 20 minutes. High-value target in a compound about 15 kilometers north of here. This one's going to be different. As Sarah gathered her equipment, she felt the familiar mixture of excitement and nervousness that came before a significant mission. She had no way of knowing that this particular operation would change everything, not just for her, but for how her entire unit viewed her capabilities as a soldier and a marksman.